back to my channel. I'm going to discuss today the remaining half of chemistry in everyday life. The first part video has already been uploaded. You can go through it if you've not already learned that part of the chapter. And this is a learn along chapter. I'm going to discuss every line and everything from which a question can be asked. So all the subjective as well as the objective questions. So this is going to be helpful for class 12th, CBSE board, fresh students, as well as the ones who are aiming for JEE, NEET, or any other kind of entrance exam related to class 12th chemistry. So let us start. I begin with chemicals in food. So chemicals are added to food for their preservation, and those chemicals are also called as preservatives, as we're going to discuss ahead. Chemicals also enhance, means increase the appeal, the visual effect of food. They add nutritional value. Nutritive value means they add important nutritional components to food. So many chemicals are added to food for different reasons, like preservation, for increasing the visual look, that is their appeal, and to add extra nutrition to these food items. So many categories are of food additives will be food colors, flavors and sweeteners. Flavors and sweeteners means something like when we add vanilla essence. So if you know, vanilla essence is a chemical belonging to the aldehyde functional group, right? Similarly, we add sweeteners to just increase sweet taste of the food. We have different variety of sweeteners, like some which add to calories, some do not, some are stable at high or low temperatures. All these components we're going to discuss ahead. Then we have fat emulsifiers and stabilizing agents. Now, what are emulsifiers? In surface chemistry chapter, you study emulsions. What are emulsions? Emulsions are basically mixtures of two or more immiscible liquids. Immiscible liquids. Say, if I want to make an emulsion of oil and water, right? Oil and water. You know, oil and water are immiscible. Ordinarily, they are going to make two different layers. One layer is going to be oil, another is going to be water. Now, in order to allow complete intermixing of these and form a colloidal solution, which is called an emulsion, we need to add some agent which can bind both these layers and help in their intermixing. So we need to add some components which can hold these two components of the colloidal solution of this emulsion together and help them to intermix. So the agent that helps in intermixing of these two components together is called an emulsifying agent. So if I give you an example of an emulsion, the cold creams that we use, they are emulsions. Cold creams are emulsions, emulsions of oil and water. But we cannot see oil and water separated. So, what gives them that stability? What helps oil and water to stay together? It's the emulsifying agent or the stabilizing agent. Details of this you've done in surface chemistry chapter. Then, flair improvers or anti-staling agents. Anti-staling agents are, as the term is telling us, anti-staling agents prevent the components from becoming stale, that is rotten, that is increasing the shelf life of these components. Flair improvers, they increase the shelf life. As an example, we have anti-staling agents. Stale means to get rotten. So anti-staling agents are going to slow down the speed at which a food gets rotten or food becomes stale. That is, they increase the shelf life of any food. Now, then we have bleaches which are going to give a visual appeal. They will cut color and help in food looking clearer. So, as an example, if I just uh, bring to your notice sugar, or let us say something like jaggery, right? If you ever buy jaggery or sugar from the market, you can see the one that we buy in the malls, nicely packed, crystal clear sugar. And if you buy it from a say a small local seller who is selling open sugar, okay, which is not purified and crystallized, and doesn't have that visual aid. What is the difference? This sugar can look very finely pale yellow in color. The crystals can be pale yellow, and the crystals that you buy, which are well packed, can be crystal clear and very white. So what is the difference between these two? Some bleaching agents are sometimes added in order to clarify color, to clear the color of the substance. Okay. Similarly, when you buy jaggery, you find jaggery of different colors. You find jaggery of a dark reddish brown color and one which is a lighter color. So, what is the difference between these? Are treated with bleaching agents. Bleaching agents are the ones which cut color. So remember that we have bleaching agent for fabrics, we have bleaching agent for different types of compounds. So these are bleaches used in food. Then we have antioxidants, we have preservatives, antioxidants which prevent the food from getting oxidized. If you cut apple and keep it for some time uh, open to atmosphere, it tends to change its color. Why? Because it gets oxidized. So oxidation can affect different kinds of foods to different extents. And then we add preservatives. Preservatives again are going to simply increase the shelf life of a substance. That means we will be able to store these substances for a longer period of time. Then we have nutritional supplements such as minerals, vitamins, and amino acids, etc. So these are the categories we're going to discuss in this chapter. Okay, so except for chemicals of category 7, none of the above categories have any nutritional value. They simply increase the shelf life of stored food. What is the meaning of shelf life? The food stored doesn't get rotten. It can be stored for a long time. Okay, for example, the tinned food you buy, say you buy tinned fruit or anything that is tinned, the moment you open the tin, it has now lesser shelf life. You can store it only for a day or so. But as long as it is sealed, it can be stored for a long period of time. So anything that increases the shelf life of stored food is called as a preservative, and these various components are used for enhancing different aspects of food items. Now we come to the first one, that is artificial sweetness. Artificial sweetening agents. Now, what are the important things? This chapter, as I had commented earlier, also is more of learning what all components you have to learn. Artificial sweetening agents. Now, natural sweeteners, for example, sucrose, add to calorie intake, and therefore people prefer to use artificial sweeteners, especially people who are diabetic. So, I have questions here. These are NCRT exercise and related questions. What are artificial sweetening agents? Give two examples. The chemical substances which give sweetening effect to food but do not add any calorie to our body are called artificial sweetening agents like aspartame, saccharin, etc. Some of them may add calories, but most of them do not. Why do we require artificial sweetening agents? Because some people who have diabetes and need to control intake of calories, they cannot take sugar. So, as a sugar substitute, artificial sweeteners are needed. What is the advantage of using? They are excreted from the body in urine unchanged. So, name the sweetening agent used in the preparation of sweets for a diabetic patient. Again, the same answer as we've discussed, saccharin. So different ways in which this question can be asked. We have a question, structure based question, children. You're not expected to remember the entire structure exactly, but what are the components that you need to know? Like we have just discussed about saccharin. This is the structure of saccharin. This is an orthosulfobenzimide as we studied ahead. And a question such as which element is not present in saccharin, an artificial sweetener. So you're going to answer which can out of these elements is missing in the structure. It is phosphorus. So you can see sulfur, you can see nitrogen, you can see carbons, and phosphorus is absent in saccharin. So the answer to this question will be phosphorus. Artificial sweetener is aspartame. Now, aspartame, most successful, widely used artificial sweetener. 100 times as sweet as cane sugar. Saccharin was 550 times more sweet, aspartame is 100 times. And this is a very important statement for a question at the board level as well as for MCQs. What is aspartame chemically? It is a methyl ester of dipeptide formed from aspartic acid and phenylalanine. Methyl ester of dipeptide. Dipeptide. What is a peptide basically? A peptide is a combination of amino acids. What are alpha amino acids? This is the structure of an alpha amino acid. This is an alpha amino acid. We study the details of this in biomolecules chapter, but I'm just giving you a quick review. So when two amino acid units combine together with the common loss of a water molecule, from here a water molecule is lost and the two components join through CONH group. Now this component, the remaining part remains the same. This part remains the same, right? So we call this as a dipeptide. Dipeptide made up of two units of amino acid, right? So this is a methyl ester of a dipeptide formed from aspartic acid and phenylalanine. Phenylalanine is also an amino acid. So the structural part you should keep in mind, the structural component. This is orthosulfobenzimide. This structure is orthosulfobenzimide, saccharin. And this is aspartame. This is the aspartic acid part. And this is the phenylalanine methyl ester part. You can see this is the methyl ester. Instead of having COOH, we have COOCH3, the ester group. This is the peptide bond, the CONH bond, which is formed from one amino acid losing its OH and another amino acid losing its H, right? This is the amide linkage. This linkage is the amide linkage formed by condensation between an acid and an amino group. Okay, so this is the aspartic acid part and this is the phenylalanine. Both these come from amino acids. So these are the structure based questions that can be asked in any way, whether it's boards or MCQs. 99.99% times questions are asked from the NCRT textbook only when it comes to even entrance exams. Okay. 0.1% I've left to chance, but 99.9% importance lies within the lines of NCRT. So do the lines of NCRT very well. Now, next is aspartame. It's the most successful and widely used artificial sweetener. We've already talked of this. The important points: 100 times as sweet as cane sugar. This is a structural component. And next is its use. So important point about its use is it is limited to cold foods and soft drinks. Why? Because it is unstable at cooking temperature. Important question. So we have three components to be memorized here. This is 100 times as sweet as cane sugar, whereas saccharin was 550. This is the structural component and this is its usability. Its limitation, it can be used only in cold foods and soft drinks. So here is a question: why is the use of aspartame limited to cold foods and soft drinks? Why? Because it is unstable at high temperatures. It decomposes at cooking temperatures. The next one is alitame. Alitame is a high potency sweetener. The disadvantage of this is it is difficult to control sweetness of food with this sweetener. But what is the advantage? It is more stable than aspartame. Alitame is a high potency sweetener. It is its advantage is it is more stable than aspartame, and its disadvantage is it is difficult to control its sweetness. So, what problem arises in using alitame as artificial sweetener? Its sweetness cannot be controlled easily. Okay. The next is sucralose. Structurally, this is a trichloro-derivative of sucrose. What is sucrose? Sucrose is a disaccharide. Sucrose is a disaccharide. This is again something that we study in biomolecules chapter. So sucrose is a disaccharide. You can see the structure here. This is a disaccharide. This is made up of two two saccharide units. Basically belongs to the category of carbohydrates, and carbohydrates are basically polyhydroxyaldehydes or polyhydroxyketones. Polyhydroxy, you can see a number of OH groups, polyhydroxyaldehydes or polyhydroxyketones, and these structures are basically the hemiacetal structures. These are the hemiacetal structures of polyhydroxyaldehydes or polyhydroxyketones. Details are talked of in the biomolecule chapter. Okay, so just remember sucralose. Sucralose is a trichloro-derivative of sucrose. What is sucrose? Sucrose is a disaccharide. What is a disaccharide? It's a classification under carbohydrates. And what are carbohydrates? These are polyhydroxyaldehydes or polyhydroxyketone derivatives. This is a structural part. Now, its appearance and taste is like sugar. Advantage, stable at cooking temperature and does not provide calories. Sucralose does not provide calories and it is stable at cooking temperatures as well. So this was all about the food, the sweetening agents. Moving on next to food preservatives. Food preservatives, again, as we discussed in the beginning only, food preservatives prevent spoilage of food due to microbial growth, and they increase the shelf life, that is the time period for which a food item can be stored. The most commonly used preservatives, you have to learn these examples: table salt, normal salt, sugar, oils, vegetable oils, and sodium benzoate. All these are examples of food preservatives. And sodium benzoate to be used in limited quantities and is metabolized in the body. Salts of sorbic acid and propanoic acid are also used as preservatives. These are things that you have to learn. And just remember salt, sugar. This we also discussed while discussing osmosis. What is the mechanism behind salt and sugar acting like preservatives? So, whenever a microbial growth begins on any food item, if the salt in the food item is high, if the salt concentration is high, the water from the body of this microbe will start moving out due to osmosis. As a result, the microbe will die and its growth will be prevented. This is how high salt or high sugar concentration acts like a preservative. So, when we make jams and pickles, they have very high salt and sugar concentration. This is to prevent microbial growth and increase their shelf life. Jams and pickles can be stored with high sugar and salt concentration even without any other additive preservatives. Okay, coming to antioxidants in foods. Uh, Antioxidants are substances. These are also important and necessary food additives because they help in food preservation by retarding the action of oxygen of food. That means by preventing oxidation of food. What is the mechanism by which they work? These antioxidants are more reactive towards oxygen. Basically, they trap oxygen to themselves and prevent the food material from getting oxidized. The most familiar antioxidants are BHT and BHA. You need to know full form of these two. This is an important question. Full form of BHT and BHA, the two antioxidants, butylated hydroxytoluene and butylated hydroxyanisole. You know what is toluene? Toluene is benzene ring with CH3 and anisole is benzene ring with OCH3. Anisole is an ether and this is a hydrocarbon. Basically, methylbenzene is toluene and methoxybenzene is anisole, and these are derivatives of these two compounds. Addition of BHA to butter increases its shelf life from months to years. Sometimes BHT and BHA along with citric acid are added to produce more effect. Then other antioxidants we can use sulfur dioxide and sulfite. These are useful antioxidants for wine, beef, sugar syrups, etc., and cut, peeled, or dried fruits and vegetables. So these are all factual points that you need to learn and understand. You can also know here the structure of citric acid. Citric acid, a very simple structure to remember. This is the structure I'm making here. This is basically propane 1,2,3 tricarboxylic acid. This is one of the important structures for IUPAC nomenclature as well. This is propane 1,2,3 tricarboxylic acid. So in this propane 1,2,3 tricarboxylic acid, if I just replace this H with OH, this H with OH, this becomes 2-hydroxy 2-hydroxy propane 1,2,3 tricarboxylic acid. 2-hydroxy propane 1,2,3 tricarboxylic acid. This is citric acid. So you can memorize the structure of citric acid as well. Now we move on to the next one, that is cleansing agents. Cleansing agents. In this topic, we are going to learn about detergents, soaps and detergents, which are used as cleansing agents. And we're going to study soaps and synthetic detergents, their preparation, their chemical structure, and their uses. These detergents, soaps and detergents, are going to improve cleansing properties of water and help in removal of fats which bind other materials to the fabric or skin. And fats, basically, these are going to comprise of dirt that we need to clean with soaps and detergents. Now, listen very carefully to the various components that you should keep in mind regarding this particular part. First point, water itself is also a cleansing agent. You know, water is a universal solvent. It dissolves a wide variety of substances, right? And why is it a universal solvent? Because it has a high dielectric constant. It can dissolve a large variety of components. The maximum variety of components water can dissolve. Okay, its dielectric constant is approximately 80. So even if you have no soap or detergent and you keep rubbing your hands for a long time underwater, this cleans your hands to a good extent. So water is a very good cleansing agent. Okay, that is why these lines say these detergents and soaps improve the cleansing properties of water. First point to keep in mind. Second, cleansing means, say this is a piece of cloth, fabric or skin, right? And this is a spot on it. Now, what is this spot chemically? This spot, that is dirt, is basically a fat. So this helps in removal of fats which bind other materials to the fabric or skin. I'm going to explain first the details of soap, how is soap formed, and what are the main reactions of soap industry. So this is glycerol. You have studied this in the chapter of alcohols and phenols. This is glycerol. Glycerol is treated with stearic acid. Stearic acid is C17H35COOH. And you know, when an alcohol combines with an acid, it undergoes esterification reaction. So esterification reaction where this OH and this H is lost and we get formation of this compound. This is called as a triester of glycerol. These are all basic terms that you should be very good with. This is a triester of glycerol. We also call it a glyceride, a triglyceride. And these basically form fats or oils. This structure composes fats or oils. When is this called a fat? When the R group in this is saturated. When the R group, this group is saturated, then we call this as fat. But if this is unsaturated, unsaturated means in case instead of C17H35, this was C17H33. That is, instead of stearic acid, it was oleic acid, then we would have considered this to be an oil. Please remember, glycerol, it's a triol, it's a trihydric alcohol. When reacts with a saturated carboxylic acid, the one I've written here is stearic acid, it leads to formation of this triester of glycerol, which we also called as a glyceride or a triglyceride, and these constitute fats or oils. What is the difference between a fat or an oil? Fats, when this C17H32 is saturated, this molecule is a fat molecule. In case it is unsaturated, such as C17H33, it will be called as an oil. Okay, now this will undergo hydrolysis. This is made to undergo hydrolysis. Hydrolysis means when treated with an aqueous alkali. Aqueous alkali, it undergoes hydrolysis. This bond breaks. Hydrolysis, lysis means breakdown, breakdown with water. So we get back glycerol. We get back glycerol along with formation of 3 moles of C17H35 COONA. Why Na? Actually, we'll be getting an acid, but since the medium is basic, this acid will react with that base to form sodium salt of the acid, which is called as soap. So this is our main target. We're talking about soap formation. Okay. So this part of the reaction is called saponification. Saponification. What is saponification? Alkaline hydrolysis, alkaline hydrolysis of fats of or oils is called saponification. Every little component, children, the entire set of questions that you can get in exams are all hidden inside NCERT lines. Okay, so if you do NCERT exhaustively, a lot of your preparation is already done. So I summarize the concept that I've just explained. I summarize, children. This first step is esterification, esterification of glycerol. And the next step is alkaline hydrolysis of glycerol, of this triester of glycerol, that is fat or oil. So alkaline hydrolysis, this reaction given here is alkaline hydrolysis, that is breakdown of this ester or a triglyceride with an alkali. This alkaline hydrolysis reaction is called as saponification, that is soap formation. And this is the formula of soap, that is sodium stearate. In case instead of stearic acid, we would have taken oleic acid. Oleic acid means C17H33 COONH. This is an unsaturated acid. This is 2 hydrogens less. So if we use this unsaturated acid, that is oleic acid. So this is going to be an oil. So oils or fats with this are going to lead to formation of soap. This is sodium stearate. So this is in general important even from organic point of view, organic chemistry, the chapter alcohols and acids. So all this you need to know. You've done the details in that chapter as well. Okay, now we come to, this was about saponification, soap industry. And another very important point that you can see here, glycerol was the raw material. Raw material means glycerol is required to prepare soap. Glycerol is a requirement of soap industry, and glycerol is also a byproduct of soap industry. Very important, glycerol is also formed at the end along with soap. So this lowers down the cost of the product because what we require, we are again regenerating it. It can be reused. So glycerol is an important byproduct of soap industry. This is an important point. Moving on to soaps are the detergents used since long. So soaps used for cleaning purposes are Sodium or potassium salts of long chain fatty acid. These are the examples. Stearic, oleic, we've already discussed. And we have palmitic. What is palmitic acid? Palmitic acid is C15H31. Palmitic acid. You can note down the formula. Palmitic acid is C15H31COOH. And you know how to decide whether a substance is saturated or not if the formula of this much part is CNH2N plus 1. That means it is a saturated acid. Okay, palmitic acid. Soaps containing sodium salts are formed by heating fat. I've already explained all this, and this is a saponification reaction. Important point here is once soap has been formed, the resulting colloidal solution has to be now further treated in order to precipitate out soap. So soap is precipitated from the solution by adding sodium chloride. What is sodium chloride going to do? C17H35COONA. This is present in colloidal form, leading to formation of these ions. So adding sodium chloride is going to provide some common ion effect. This is going to provide some common ion effect. This is a saturated solution, a colloidal form. Okay, so it's like in equilibrium with its ions, although it's a strong electrolyte. But since it's a saturated solution, it's in equilibrium with its ions. So adding excess of sodium ions is going to force the equilibrium in the backward direction, helping in the precipitation of soap. So this is what these points are trying to explain. Now, solution after left after removing the soap contains glycerol, which can be removed by fractional distillation. What is fractional distillation? Distillation that is applied to substances which have a very small difference in their boiling points. So only sodium and potassium soaps are soluble in water and are used for cleaning purposes. That means the anion we have discussed can be either a palmitate ion or stearate ion or oleate ion, but the cation has to be only sodium and potassium. So generally potassium soaps are soft. So this is one question which can be asked. Which are softer soaps, sodium soaps or potassium? Potassium soaps are softer to the skin and prepared by using potassium hydroxide instead of sodium hydroxide. Both potassium hydroxide and sodium hydroxides are the alkalis which can be used for alkaline hydrolysis. Using potassium hydroxide is going to give us a potassium salt which will be softer than the sodium salt. Coming to types of soaps, all soaps are made by boiling fats or oils with suitable soluble hydroxides such as KOH or NaOH. And then these topics, children, you just have to learn the variations that are made, the additives that are added to soaps in addition to its normal chemical composition, that is sodium salt of an acid. The other components that are added have to be learned, like other additives, some to aid fragrance, some to give it some other aesthetic look, some to have, lighter effect or transparent, or to just alter certain properties for visual effects or to change certain other applications. Additives are added. So toilet soaps are prepared by using better grades of fats and oils, and care is taken to remove excess alkali. Because toilet soaps are to be used on skin, so they need to be softer. Hence, very strong alkalis are not used, and excess alkali has to be removed after the precipitation of soap. Color and perfumes are added to make them more attractive. Then soaps that float in water are made by beating tiny air bubbles before they're hardening. Transparent soaps by dissolving soap in ethanol and then evaporating the excess solvent. So these are just components that you have to learn. Medicated soaps, some other components are added, such as say antiseptics are added, and we discussed earlier also biethionyl is added to soap for its antiseptic properties. Okay, we studied this under antiseptics. Then shaving soaps contain glycerol to prevent rapid drying. What is glycerol? Glycerol we've just studied is this trihydric alcohol. This is glycerol. Propane triol is IUPAC name, propane triol, and it is a hygroscopic substance. Hygroscopic substance means it can absorb moisture, and that is why it prevents rapid drying. And glycerol is used as a hygroscopic substance to prevent rapid drying. A gum called rosin is added while making them. It forms sodium rosinate. And what is the purpose of these fillers? Sodium rosinate, sodium silicate, borax, and sodium carbonate are fillers. You can have a multiple choice question created from here. Which of the following are fillers or which of the following is not a filler? So sodium rosinate, sodium silicate, borax, and sodium carbonate are fillers, and these enhance the property of forming lather, increase the property of forming lather. So laundry soaps contain fillers like this, and fillers are basically those substances which are added for some additive application. Like sodium rosinate is added to increase lather forming ability. Soap chips are made by running a thin sheet of melted soap onto a cool cylinder and scraping off the soaps in small broken pieces. This is something factual that you have to learn. Then we have soap granules prepared, soap bubbles, soap powders, scoring soaps. All this has to be read, children. Fine. So, such as powdered pumice or finely divided sand, builders like sodium carbonate, sodium trisodium phosphate, etc., are added. Now, what do builders do? Builders simply make the soap act more rapidly. Now, next we come to why do soaps not work in hard water? So we're going to now talk of soaps and detergents. What is hard water? Hard water is the water which contains salts of calcium and magnesium. Which salts? Calcium and magnesium, bicarbonates, chlorides, and sulfates. So a soap which contains these ions is called hard water. What is the problem of using soap with hard water? With hard water, this is, let us say, a water sample containing calcium chloride. So water sample containing calcium chloride is hard water. It has temporary hardness. Remember, hardness due to bicarbonates is temporary hardness, and hardness due to chlorides and sulfates is permanent hardness. Why is this temporary hardness? Because it can be removed by boiling. The other two are permanent hardness. Why does hardness of water affect the cleansing action of soap? So we are going to study this point. Now, calcium chloride in water makes it permanently hard. Permanent hardness means not easy to remove. This hardness is not easy to remove. So this soap, when reacts with calcium chloride present in hard water, it leads to formation of this insoluble calcium stearate, which precipitates out in the form of a scum. These insoluble soaps separate as scum, right? And this leads to wastage of the soap without bringing in any cleansing effect. The precipitate adheres onto the fiber of the cloth as a gummy mass and prevents washing action, creates unnecessary wastage of soap and unnecessary problems like this scum, this dirty looking scum adheres to the fabric. Okay, so hair washed with hard water also looks dull because of this sticky precipitate. Dye does not absorb evenly on cloth washed with soap using hard water because of this gummy mass. So because of this problem, soap does not work well with hard water. The forms of questions that can be asked related to the lines we have just studied. So these are the questions and the answers we have already discussed for these. So here we come to synthetic detergents. Synthetic detergents, these are cleansing agents which have all the properties of soaps but which actually do not contain any soap. Synthetic detergent. Synthetic means artificially prepared. And what are detergents? We'll just take up the chemical aspect of these. These do not contain soap. These can be used both in soft and hard water. So the first point is, what is the advantage of using detergents over soaps? Detergents, synthetic detergents, they do not form scum with hard water. They can be used equally well in soft as well as hard water because they give foam even in hard water. But soaps, due to their problem of forming scum, do not form foam with hard water. So I repeat, children, soaps do not form lather, do not form lather with hard water. whereas detergents do not have this problem. Detergents do form foam or lather even with hard water. Okay, this is an advantage of using detergents, synthetic detergents over soaps. Okay, now synthetic detergents are classified into three categories: anionic, ationic, and non-ionic. And this is an extremely important question for your boards and for MCQs. This has been asked quite a number of times in the previous board exams also. It has been asked as write a note, classify, write a note on either of these, or as a complete topic, classify and discuss. So it can also be asked as MCQs to identify which of the following is cationic, anionic, or some more questions that I'm going to discuss ahead. So this is a very important topic. You can just mark it as a high yield topic when it comes to questions. Now, anionic detergents are, first thing that you need to know is the composition. These are sodium salts of sulfonated long chain alcohols or hydrocarbons. Sulfonated long chain alcohols or hydrocarbons. Alkyl hydrogen sulfates. What is an alkyl hydrogen sulfate? This is the formula of an alkyl hydrogen sulfate. Please remember there is a difference between sulfonates and sulfates. Sulfonates and sulfates. Just uh, look here and compare these two structures. This is SO3H. This is a derivative of benzene, sulfonic acid, and organic acid. Okay. Whereas this part is SO3H, but it has an extra O. Okay. So this is hydrogen sulfate. R HSO4 is alkyl hydrogen sulfate. Be very clear about this. This is alkyl hydrogen sulfate. And our SO3H is alkyl sulfonic acid or alkane sulfonic acid. Do not confuse the two components. So, alkyl hydrogen sulfates formed by treating long chain alcohols. This is a long chain alcohol. This is lauryl alcohol. And lauryl alcohol is treated with concentrated sulfuric acid. Concentrated. This is even things like as small a thing like this can also be asked whether we are treating it with concentrated or dilute sulfuric acid. Concentrated sulfuric acid, and we get formation of lauryl hydrogen sulfate. What has basically happened? This OH and this H has been lost, and we are getting lauryl hydrogen sulfate. This is made to undergo hydrolysis. Aqueous alkali, we are treating, this is alkyl hydrogen sulfate, this is acidic. This is acidic, this has an acidic H, this is an alkali. This OH and this H combined, lost as water, and we get a sodium salt. It's as simple as lauryl hydrogen sulfate shows acidic properties because of this H, reacts with an alkali, forming a salt. So, an example of an anionic detergent is sodium lauryl sulfate. This is one example. Sodium lauryl sulfate. Remember the formula. And the second example is do-decyl benzene with sulfuric acid giving a do-decyl benzene sulfonic acid. And then this is a sodium salt, sodium sulfonate. So we have two categories under anionic detergents. The hydrogen sulfates, sodium salts of hydrogen sulfates, and sodium salts of sulfonic acid. Okay. And in anionic detergents, the anionic part is involved in cleansing action. Now, I summarize. If you get to write a note on anionic detergents at the board level for a subjective attempt, what are you going to say? You will first give its preparation formed from any one of the two equations or both the equations, and then specify that anionic part of the molecule is involved in cleansing action and mention one example. Every time you get to write a note or define, mentioning an example is a must. With cationic detergents, again in cationic detergents, you have to remember the formula. These are quaternary ammonium salts of amines with acetates, chlorides, or bromides. How to remember this quaternary ammonium, children? If you know RNH2, this is called a 1-degree amine. If I replace another H with R, it is a 2-degree amine. If I replace another H, this is a 3-degree amine, right? And you know In amines, nitrogen has an unshared pair. If this unshared pair is also used up, this is a 4-degree amine. This is a quaternary. This is a tetra-alkyl quaternary ammonium ion. This is in general tetra-alkyl ammonium ion. Ammonium ion. You can also visualize this by imagining this is ammonium ion. I replace every H with R, it becomes tetra-alkyl ammonium ion. Okay. And if this is ammonium bromide, this will become tetra-alkyl ammonium bromide. And now look at this structure. This structure has nitrogen with 4 alkyl groups and 1 this group. What is this group? This is a C16 group. So a C16 group is called a cetyl group. So what does this structure become? This structure becomes a cetyl trimethyl ammonium bromide. This is tetraalkyl ammonium bromide. So I have defined this tetraalkyl part here as cetyl trimethyl ammonium bromide. Okay, so you have to remember this part, and since the cleansing action here is done by the cationic component, so these are called cationic detergents. Cetyl trimethyl ammonium bromide, a popular cationic detergent used in hair conditioners. Okay, these have germicidal properties, are expensive, so comparatively limited in use. Then we have non-ionic detergents. The name itself is telling us we are neither having cation here nor anion. These are non-ionic, that means do not have ions in their constitution. So one of the examples is stearic acid and polyethylene glycol. Polyethylene glycol. We already know what are glycols. Glycols are dihydric alcohol, CH2OH, CH2OH. Earlier we talked of glycerol, which is a trihydric alcohol. This is a dihydric alcohol glycol, and this is polyethylene glycol, means polymerized component. So stearic acid with polyethylene glycol, these two again undergo esterification reaction, this loss of water and formation of this product, which is a non-ionic detergent. Okay, so liquid washing detergents, liquid dishwashing detergents are generally the non-ionic type, and the mechanism of all these is same. They are going to remove grease and oil by micelle formation. What is micelle formation? We'll just discuss. One problem that appears in the use of detergents is if their hydrocarbon chain is highly branched. We have important questions for MCQs as well as subjective attempt here. If the hydrocarbon chain is highly branched, then the bacteria cannot degrade. So slow degradation of detergents leads to their accumulation, which is not good for river bodies. So they persist in water even after sewage treatment, and hence they lead to water pollution. Okay, so that means which detergents are better? The ones which are less branched. Unbranched chains can be biodegraded more easily, and hence pollution is prevented. So I'm going to comment on the kind of questions that are important for this. First, advantage of detergents over soaps. What is the advantage of detergents over soaps? We have already discussed that detergents can lather even in hard water, can form lather, that is foam, even in hard water, whereas soaps cannot. Okay, and what is the advantage of soap over detergents? This is soap is biodegradable, whereas detergent is non-biodegradable. Non-biodegradable, and detergents become still less non-biodegradable if they have a highly branched chain. So unbranched chains are comparatively more biodegradable and hence cause less of pollution. Okay, now coming to soap action. Let us suppose for soap action, let us suppose this is dirt or a fat or oil molecule, or say grease, dirt or grease. This is grease or oil and fat, dirt trapped in that. And this is our piece of fabric, fabric or skin, whatever we want to clean. And this is the dirt or grease, trapped in grease. So when soap is used, soap has two components. Soap is basically long chain fatty acid. So this is soap molecule, right? Long chain fatty acid. When you put the soap in water, this is the electrolytic end. So electrolytic end means this sodium ion is going to simply get ionized and be present in water. Here we have a bucket, let us say a bucket containing water. So sodium gets ionized, is free, and this is the carboxylate end. This is the ionic end. So this is the water loving, the hydrophilic end. Water loving charged hydrophilic end or polar end. This is polar, hydrophilic, water loving end. So this is going to be attracted towards water, whereas this is the non-polar hydrocarbon, hydrocarbon, hydrophobic end, hydrophobic end, right? And oil and grease are also having long non-polar components. So basically, the non-polar hydrocarbon end is more soluble in grease or oil. This end is more soluble in grease and oil. So these non-polar hydrocarbon parts, they start getting bound or attracted towards the grease or the dust component, whereas the COO negative part gets attracted towards water. Water. So this way, a micelle is formed. This kind of a cluster of these particles around dirt or grass or grease are called micelles, right? So it's like so many non-polar parts are holding the grease tightly. And when you give scrubbing action, when you rub the surface of cloth with soap or detergent, due to that scrubbing action, there's a lot of water that is used to rinse. Water pulls the polar part. The polar part is attached to the non-polar part, and the non-polar part is attached to dirt. So when a lot of scrubbing action is given, and we have a lot of water to rinse it off, water pulls this part. This in turn pulls the dirt or grease out of the surface of cloth. So this is the mechanism of cleansing action of soap. So you need to be able to understand the hydrophilic and the hydrophobic parts of any given molecule as well. So I have a question here. Label the hydrophilic and the hydrophobic parts in the following compounds. So this part, the ionic part, is going to be the hydrophilic part. This is hydrophilic. And this non-polar part is going to be the hydrophobic part. Similarly, this part is hydrophobic. And this part, the charged part, is going to be hydrophilic. Basically, charged parts are hydrophilic and hydrophobic. In this case, this is a non-ionic detergent, but this end is going to have a tendency to form hydrogen bonds with water. So this is going to be water-loving, hydrophilic, and the non-polar part is going to be hydrophobic. The non-polar part is going to be hydrophobic. Similarly, here also if we have to identify the non-polar part, this entire part is hydrophobic and this part is going to be hydrophilic. You just have to remember that part which will have strong affinity for water, either because it's ionic or it's highly polar or it has a tendency to form hydrogen bonds, is going to be water loving. The non-polar parts are going to be hydrophilic, hydrophobic. This is one kind of question. So other questions I've written here, we've already answered. Give one suitable example of non-ionic detergents, or why are detergents better than soaps? Why detergents are better than soaps? Because they are less affected by hard water and they can be used in acidic solutions. Another question we have here as which of the following is a cationic detergent? So you already know cetyl trimethyl ammonium bromide. is an example of cationic detergent. So everything that can be asked in the form of a question has been discussed in this. You now are in a position to prepare this chapter very well. And trust me, children, this is going to help you both for your boards as well as your MCQs, for JE, for NEET, anything that can be asked, I have discussed. And do this chapter thoroughly, learn it well, learn along as you read. You can keep putting it on pause and then learning those topics and then going back and reviewing. So even on the last day before your exam, this is going to be available to you, and you can just review and revise repeatedly. If you like this video and if you feel this is going to be of help to you, do comment below, and please do share, subscribe. This helps to keep us motivated, and it'll help me to do better work. Yeah. Thank you, children. Have a good day. Enjoy your learning.